Hey, Garth. Ah, cool. So you guys have started doing a meetup. Yes, very happy to hear that. I ruled it with an iron fist, Luke says. Dude, if you guys want to chat, come on up. There's a link at the top. Otherwise, I actually should be doing some work. Not that I'm actually going to do it, but I can pretend. Dr. Andani! Whoa! I would love to have you on, Dr. Andani. I told Sam to give you my email address. Sam is a good friend of mine. Sam from Transfigured, the channel. He's the Unitarian Christian. You've been on his channel more than once, I think. Garth has to go back to work. I did not hear what Mr. Khalilullah did this week. What did Mr. Khalilullah do this week? Has Khalil been being a not good boy? Luke!
What up? I'll probably have to leave in a short amount of time, but that's typical.
Yes, it is. How dare you have children? Have
Yes.
Dr. Andani? Do you remember Dr. Andani from Sam's channel? Luke is a good friend of Sam's as well.
Hello,
Is
hello. I thought I would just tell you directly what happened. So, do you remember? I think it was Sunday. We had a whole discussion about how the Salafi thing makes no sense,
Okay. Yes.
right? You were there, like you're in the clip.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
Yes,
that.
yeah. So we had an extended discussion about what do Salafis believe about God's hand and this and that, and then I said, it's double standards, you know.
Right.
And do you recall when I said all that, how they shouldn't criticize Christians for believing in trinities, and do you remember how Kalula what his reaction was on that stream?
He seemed to be like, "Oh yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense."
Right, right. So and then his team also agreed, right? They said it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and remember you were part of that. So so
Okay.
um uh so the next day I just shared a link to that part of the discussion on my Twitter, and I said, look, Muslim converts are starting to doubt the Salafi dogma as well because it doesn't make any sense, right?
Okay.
So I
Right.
shared that on Twitter, and the next day, I believe, maybe it was 2 days later, I don't recall. The next day, he's doing his stream as usual, and I come in the chat as usual, like I always do. And he said, "Oh, I have a special announcement to make." And he, for the next like 10 minutes, he went on to say that I'm a dishonest person and I was lying, and how dare I question Salafism, and he claimed that I brought up the debate with Jake because I couldn't let it go, although that's not what the stream was about. And I mean, he basically backpedaled the entire thing from what we heard, and claimed that I don't know what words he used, something like he's like, oh, why is he like elevating what he had said about questioning Salafism, and why was I tweeting that out? You know, this sort of it was flabbergasting. He basically backpedaled everything he said and made it seem that I went on his show to like deceive everybody about what Salafis believe.
Well, you can tell me what they believe because I don't even know what this is.
No, I'm just telling our host here because he was
Oh,
there.
Yeah. So I think I've told you, Luke, about EA Dawa, that channel, that Muslim channel I've been going on.
yeah, yep.
So Khalil, he was raised as a Christian, and he went. Um, hey, John.
Hello.
He, he went on. He went on to become. He was actually considering going to Bible college and becoming a pastor, and
Uh-oh.
he became a hardcore atheist, including his channel um, was yeah was eternal. EA actually apparently stood for eternal atheism. And then what happened was that he started talking to a bunch of Muslims, and and they convinced him, and he took his shahada about a year ago. And he's always been incredibly nice to me. I have to say, I have never seen him be unfair. Although, yeah, I mean, okay, I have to say that from Donnie, I'm not sure it's from what you've described that it is. I I haven't seen the Twitter post, but I can kind of understand the reaction being, hold up here. I'm not doubting anything. You're making too much of a claim. I have to listen to what Taylor says, and I have to see what's going on. But
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I can
Somebody
hardly
is
hear you with the
making all
guy
this
hawking a
noise.
chinik he's hawking a
Oh,
chinik.
I thought
Um,
I mute.
but I wanted to say that if you listen to the stream, everything I say of Salafism, he agrees with. He actually says, I don't consider myself in the Salafi thing. Like EA Dawa says this. And then his whole team agreed. And then I'm telling you what's happened is that his Salafi like handlers heard the stream and straightened him out. Because it's like night and day. The next day, he's like, quote unquote, Dr. Khalil, as if I'm not a real doctorate, right? He calls me a kafir. And he just the other day, he said he was wrong to do that. I think you were there. He said he was wrong to do that. And then the other day, he's like, no, you are a kafir. And, you're a hypocrite because when I criticize, he's like, he said, when I agree with him, when EA agrees with me on Salafism, he's like, you elevate my voice. But when I called you a kafir, months ago, you said that was wrong. Well, yeah, because you were wrong. So I'm telling you, it's a complete 180. It was very disrespectful. It was basically a bunch of ad hominem personal attack. He used some like homophobic like slurs as well in what he said.
well, he does that, and yeah, I mean,
you should listen because you were there, and I don't think me saying. Firstly, it's his show, and it's a public link. So, is there a policy that I'm not allowed to share a link to a stream that I was in? This is news to me.
well, I have asked Khalil for permission to share his streams because generally, I mean, he owns the copyright.
No, share, bro. Share means you share the link to his channel, not
Oh,
repost.
yeah, sharing the link to the channel. I thought you took a clip.
No, I just share a link to the original stream.
Wow.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah,
And
I
that's
mean,
what he got mad at. Because I simply stated this is what we talked about, and I shared a link to his stream. And then he backpedaled the whole thing. I'm telling you, these guys
yeah,
are like most Dawa channels on YouTube are Salafi in some sense. They're either explicitly Salafi or they're like handled by Salafis.
right. And I am sure there is actually Saudi Arabian money behind it. Yeah. I don't know. So this is one of the things that I actually do talk about on my channel on a regular basis is people think that the best way to get a spokesman for what you want is to go find somebody who's a good speaker and give them money to say whatever you want them to say. Dawa is the Muslim equivalent of apologetics and evangelism. Um, yes, I know you're not a
Yeah, today that's what it is. The original notion of Dawa, which actually Ismaili started. We were the first Dais, and it was
well. Yes,
not.
I actually I was
Yeah,
going to ask you about that once I
yeah.
had you on my
That's
channel
the irony of
because
the whole thing. But what originally what Dawa meant was not apologetics, but an invitation that was done in through very one-on-one private conversations, inviting someone to understand the deeper spiritual philosophical dimensions of Islam. So that's why Ismailis had dies, but Sunnis didn't have that because they didn't
yeah,
have that whole notion.
I mean I've been trying to kind of look into this stuff, and I do have questions for you, especially I mean about the Aga Khan and stuff, but without getting into all of that, um, the best way to actually amplify your message is to find somebody who believes it and to put money behind them that the person doesn't even necessarily know about. I mean, there may be people amplifying um, his channel, and this was actually my reaction when I spoke with Sam about Jake's reaction to you, Dr. Andani. Um, Jake's career has been made by being by being supported, I believe, probably by Saudi Arabia backed groups. I mean,
Yeah, I
it's not
agree.
even that.
It's also very clear all these people publicly play that tune, even though they may not believe it, but they like appease these
They have
Salafi
to.
folks.
They have to. If they don't, I mean, they may not be aware of it, but I will guarantee you that actually Jake's channel and his prominence will go down immediately if he were to stop uh, if he were to say something that is directly against
Yeah,
Saudi.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly so. That's what I'm saying. And you know, this is not the first time. When I went on Paul Williams' show last year, which that the whole story is that me being an academic guest on Paul Williams' channel, blogging theology, that's what started this entire conflict between me, Salafis, and their poster boys. Like that did it because the Salafis first tried to remove the video from Paul's channel, which they succeeded for a week. Then Paul was advised by some Sunni academics, non-Salafi academics, and they said that he should not have taken down my video. That you know, there's no problem. So he put it back, and the Salafis got very upset. And their reaction to losing that battle was to recruit Jake to become an anti-Ismaili polemicist.
Right.
And then when Jake did that, he went on a warpath for about a week, and I responded. And then Jake issued the debate challenge, and then the debate was supposed to be like the final sort of thing to get rid of me, not physically, but you know, intellectually. And then you know, it didn't work out for them, obviously. So
Saudi Arabia puts a lot of money into making sure that their version of Islam is what most people know. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I think large numbers, as far as I know. I mean, again, I am not well versed in Islam and the Muslim community, although I'm better versed than a lot of people. From my experience, most actual Muslims are not at all. They're not at all denominational, really, and they don't necessarily have any sort of denominational, um, you know, uh, position, and they just go to the local mosque, which
that's
has.
correct. That's correct.
And
Yeah.
the fact is that when Saudi Arabia is funding all of these, what's the plural of masjid? Masajid?
Masajid, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Islamic centers, whatever they're calling it these days.
Right. And they are hiring the imams and paying the salaries of the imams. This, as far as I understand, they are, in fact, they are amplifying their denomination in ways that that really doesn't reflect necessarily all of the congregants, because a lot of people just they go to their masjid and they pray, and they don't really realize that there is this kind of factionalism, or they don't really care that there is this factionalism, but Saudi money is really affecting things, as far as I understand. Yeah, Dr. Andani, I can tell he's taking care of his kids while he's doing this. I would have liked to I would have liked to get a chance to talk to him when he
Yeah, I'm around, as you said. I'm taking care of
yeah.
kids and doing all these things. I'm listening. But yeah, it's as I suspected. I think the Salafi handlers of that channel had a word with him. That's the only explanation for a 180-degree turn.
I wouldn't say it's only. you do have to realize he must have they must have come and explained a lot of things to him and talked to him about it. And we do outsource our cognition to the people that we know. He is very new in Islam, and yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I was more surprised. I but yeah.
No, but here's the thing, right? If at the end of the day you're just ideological, that means this is not like. I mean, look, people have every right to believe and do whatever they want, but I find that again, this is another double standard. So at the end of the day, it's not an open-ended search for truth and logic, and it's not some open-ended search for truth and logic for what's the best position, right? It's just like, okay, this is what the Salafi handlers tell me is the right thing to do, so now I have to do it, right?
I don't think it's that straightforward and cut. I think you have to realize that, you know, Khalil is within a community where he's speaking to many people, and I mean, I would be interested to talk to him about this further. I don't know how that's going to go, but the fact is he has kids and he has a wife, and if yeah, that kid does sound adorable, Dr. Andani. Your kid very much sounds adorable. But if I mean, this is part of the thing of money will corrupt things in ways that people may not actually be aware of. Sometimes you end up lying to yourself, in and I don't think Khalil is going, oh well, this is where my support is coming from, I'm going to now attack Ismailis even more. But you cannot serve God and Mammon. Yeah, Luke is correct about that. Audience capture is also real. Audience capture is very real, and look, I think in any community we do look towards our leaders, and I don't blame Khalil for having imams. I would hope he has imams who do talk to him and who do offline try to convince him of various things. And I know Kino and Friendly Muslim and other people are also having input. Yeah, I have to say it's unfortunate. I am not as surprised as I could have been. You want to say something, Luke?
Not really. I mean, I know pretty much nothing about this. I usually have lots of thoughts, and I know nothing about this. Besides that,
Saudi Arabia puts a lot of money into
So
Muslim.
you should look up what Salafism is. It's like the denomination of Sunni Islam that started about 300 years ago.
Okay, your kid is way too cute.
she wants cake, I think. That's
Yeah, it's a he actually.
oh, he.
Oh,
Well, he's young.
He wants the cake.
Can't blame him.
No, you can't. I mean, if when you're a young boy, cake is far more important than Salafism. So Salafi is the, I hate to say denomination of Islam, but it's the bent. They're very fundamentalist, and Dr. Andani is from a. I hope Dr. Andani doesn't mind me saying this, but somewhat fringe.
I mean, fringe is the wrong word. We're not fringe. The Salafis are fringe. Like
Well, what
historically and
percentage
theologically,
of the
we are
world's
not fringe.
Muslims are Ismail?
Sorry?
What percentage of the world's Muslims are
I don't know, but there's probably more Ismailis than Salafis.
Really?
Yeah, because
That
the Ismailis have been here for 1,200 years. The Salafis have been around for 300 years, right? Like the
this is
Ismailis
true.
founded, the Ismailis
Ismailis
found
are
literally.
Shia.
Sorry.
Ismailis, I believe, are Shia Muslims.
Of course, yeah, and at one point we were the largest Shia denomination until the Safavid era, which resulted
Right.
in 12er Shiism being taken. So to say that Ismailis are fringe is a little ridiculous. That would mean like
I don't mean to
our.
be offensive.
I
As
know,
far
but
as I know,
I'm just taking exception with fringe as a descriptive, valid description. It's not a valid
uh,
description.
you know, I, as
Because
far as I
fringe
know,
would mean that there's a group that not only is numerically minor, but they've had like little to no influence on the mainstream.
I
That
did
would
not
not
mean
Well,
describe
that.
what's
Ismaili.
Yeah,
weird about
that would be wrong.
what's weird about fringe and like centers and peripheries and fringes is the way that I conceive of it. It's not necessarily quantitative or numeric or about influence. Like sometimes, I mean, this is very in our little world, Peugeotian. You can have an inverted world where the fringe is running the whole damn show. You know.
Well, so Ismaili, and I was actually very surprised to learn that Al Azhar was founded by Ismailis, and
Yeah, because there was an Ismaili caliphate, the Fatimids, right, who at one point even controlled Mecca and Medina. They even
right,
took over Baghdad for a bit. They had control over major Islamic lands, Syria, uh, Yemen. I
right.
mean, all these North Africa. They were the main rivals of the Byzantines. They even ruled Sicily. They built the city of Cairo, right? So this is Cairo is an Ismaili city originally, like what we today would call old Cairo.
The
So
history the history of Ismaili is very very important in Islam, and was very and has is continues to be very influential. Um, but it is a minority within Shiite Islam, and most Muslims are Sunni. And I like I was saying, Saudi Arabia has a lot of money. They actually pay for and own, in a very real sense, a lot of the masjids all over the world, which kind of also means that they get to hire who the imams are of those masjids. And so most of I mean I haven't taken any sort of poll. I haven't seen the actual numbers, but my guess would be that a majority of masjids in the West, in the United States, are probably the imam is somebody who was
So I
uh,
don't know. I don't know if it's the majority, but even if it happened to be the majority of masjids in the West are Salafi influence, it would not make the Salafis mainstream because at the end of the day, right, mainstream Sunni Islam is diametrically opposed to what the Salafis believe in. That's just the fact of it. So the interesting thing about this is that if you take there's a set of theological and practice issues that the Salafis differ from the rest of the Muslims on, right? So on
I
those
did not.
differences, yes. So on those differences, the Ismailis are much closer to the Sunni mainstream on those points than the Salafis are,
So what are
right?
those points?
One point would be God, the concept of God. So um, the Quran and the Hadith are full of expressions, descriptions of God that taken at face value are anthropomorphic. God's hands, face, feet, his throne, this whole thing. His coming down, his rising up, right? So on anthropomorphism, the mainstream Sunni position, of which the Ismailis agree with and 12 or Shia agree with, is that these have to be taken metaphorically, right? God's hand is something like God's power or God's favor. They certainly do not mean that God has something that befits the description of hand. whatever you take can to be. So that's that's a trademark Salafi position, that the Salafis reject all the metaphorical readings of these, and they think these are actual divine qualities. God has a
Yeah,
real hand, he has a real
that's
face.
very surprising, and I think it was even
Yeah, it's very surprising because they attack the Salafis are the biggest proponents of accusing people of idolatry, and yet they basically worship and sort of an idol of sorts. So that's one thing. The second thing would be um, intercession. So it's a mainstream Muslim practice to seek divine favor and blessings through intermediary figures like the Prophet Muhammad, like the family of Prophet Muhammad, like the saints, i.e., certain holy men and women that are recognized in the tradition as close to God. So that's known as intercessory prayer. It's often even done at shrines. So great Sufi saints, if you go to their shrines today, it's filled with like hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people in places like India, Pakistan. That's a mainstream practice that Sunnis fully validate. And again, on that point, Ismailis and Twelvers are with the mainstream Sunni view. They accept it. The Salafis say this is not only forbidden, but they say it's idolatry, it's shirk, and it takes you out of Islam if you engage in any form of intercessory prayer, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the Salafis then quote unquote fringe on that issue. And then there's more issues such as, for example, what legal school do you need to follow a legal school? The Sunnis obviously will say yes, you do. The Salafis are founded on sort of rejecting the necessity of following a Sunni legal school. They're like, no, like we can do our own thing.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
stuff like this, and then you can line up a whole bunch of examples of this sort.
mhm.
Where the Salafis are on one side that basically nobody else takes.
So, audience question: would Dr. Andani say that Salafism is heretical, or would that be going too far?
Sorry, the heretical question.
Yeah, would you say that Salafism is heretical?
I would say this, that for most Sunni Muslims, as well as Ismailis and Twelvers, it is heretical. In other words, it is seen as something that's not that's a deviation from the truth. But to be fair, every Muslim group deems other ones a little bit heretical, right?
Right.
Um, so Twelvers will say this about Sunnis, Sunnis will say, and Twelvers will say this about Ismailis. So everybody's a little bit off the truth. But Salafism, for many mainstream Sunnis and Shias, it's like very heretical. It's like
Would
really
you say
off
it's
the
common
thing.
that would you say that most Muslims believe uh, in prayer through intercessory
Yes,
prayer?
yes. Most Muslims at least accept its validity, uh, if not see it as like a benefit, like a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I have to say again, in the West, very much our view is colored by um, a belief that comes from Saudi Arabia spending a lot of money to publicize their view and legitimize their view. And therefore, a lot of people who don't know really the history of Islam very well do believe that, in fact, the Salafi understanding of Islam is, in fact, what it means to be a Muslim.
No, I agree with you, and this is why the academic study of Islam is so important in the West, because there's, apart from academic study and academic publication, how are people going to find out about the historical reality and diversity of Islam? There's just no other way. You can't rely on Dawa orgs to do it because they're basically all Salafi controlled.
Right. I do have to say, I think we have to make a more positive effort to try to actually speak with Muslims. And it's unfortunate that, well, the fact is similar to if you speak to an average Christian, you're not going to find somebody who is well versed in the history and traditions of all forms of Christianity. You would be lucky to find somebody who understands their own denomination very well. And part of the reason a lot of the people who move to the United States, I know this is certainly true among Persians, is a lot of the people who moved to the United States did so out of a rejection and dislike for a lot of things that they saw as Islam. And that also jades their view. And so the information that's available in English is is very biased. I don't know. I really don't know how we fix that. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of hope for academia for various reasons.
Well, I think part of the solution is people who do have that knowledge and who can proliferate it in different mediums. Academics and semi-academics and just well-read people need to just be more vocal on social media, because all of the whole social media Islam discourse is, again, Salafi dominated. It doesn't have to be, though, right?
I ask you, what do you think of Shabbir Ali? Are you aware of him?
Yeah, he taught me Arabic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at University of Toronto, when I started my academic journey, the first class I took was Intro Arabic with Shabbir Ali. It was very good teacher. Very nice guy. Yeah.
He's Sunni.
Yeah, he's Sunni, but like a little bit reformist, which is fine, I think.
Yeah, well, that's part of the reason a lot of the Salafis don't really like him.
Yeah, they don't like him. Even some traditional Sunnis don't like him. But whatever, man. I mean, the legal interpretation is supposed to be dynamic. It's not supposed to just freeze from the medieval period. And Shabbir Ali takes a dynamic interpretation of the Quran and legal matters, and he's not the only one. Khalid Abul Fadl is an Al-Azhar trained Sunni jurist and a legal academic in the United States, and he also takes this dynamic understanding of Islamic law, and so does people like Mufti Abu Layth. And frankly, I think had the Salafis not been around, what people like Shabbir Ali say and what Khalid Abul Fadl say would be mainstream Sunni hermeneutics today, had the Salafis not been here. Because the Salafis are here, they have sort of, their finger is in everybody's pie.
So I would love to hear what you have to say. I know that Yusuf Qarzawi just died, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the Imam al-Azhar, but as far as leadership within the general Sunni community, what do you think is going on, and who do you think?
I think there is a change. I've noticed a change. So if you go on Twitter right now, right, and you see what's going on, there is a Sunni Salafi battle. And even people like me are caught in the middle of that too. And so there's an outright ideological debate between Salafis and Sunnis on Twitter. They're debating all the issues I mentioned.
Is it obvious who is going to succeed Qarzawi as the leader in he was a Salafi, right?
I have not read enough about him or of Qarzawi, I can't really say.
Okay. Yeah, because I knew that he was very influential in Saudi Arabia, and when I heard he died, I was wondering who's going to take over and what that is going to mean. Modus Trollin says, "What Muslim podcast would Dr. Andani recommend us to follow, if any? I very casually follow a couple, but they may be Salafi. I don't know. Yasir Qadihi and Newman Ali Khan. Well, Dr. Andani has his own channel, which I do recommend. And Shabbir Ali also has a channel. I believe it's called Let the Quran Speak. Dr. Andani has to deal with his kids, which is we did talk about. Yeah. So completely deistic. We did kind of discuss that a little bit. Apparently, hello, how are you? Apparently, there was a. So when I was on EA Dawa's channel, Dr. Andani came on, and we were discussing some ideas, basic ideas of Salafis, specifically regarding interpretations of places where it mentions like the hand of Allah or the throne of Allah. I believe these are even in the Quran themselves, and the discussion seemed to go where Khalil and even Kino seemed to agree with Dr. Andani. Here, I will let Dr. Andani speak for himself. I was promoting Neoplatonism and critiquing Salafism, even though Khalil and his team agreed with almost all of what I said regarding Salafism. And so when Dr. Andani shared a link on Twitter to that discussion, apparently Khalil took exception to that and said that it was in some way offensive or whatever, and so yeah. Don't really know what to tell you. By the way, I do want to say I make anybody who I know is a trustworthy person a moderator on my channel. So there are many people who are. You will notice that most of the regulars on my channel, especially people who I actually know the name of, that they're actual human beings, they will all be moderators on my channel. That does not mean that they are somehow endorsing my channel. I don't want to make that make anybody feel that being a moderator somehow makes them an endorser of my channel. It's for me to keep crazy people out, and so I allow anybody who is an actual person to be a moderator on my channel. But back to what we were saying, apparently Khalil took exception to Dr. Andani's look. I have to say, I mean, similar things happened before with I so the I mean, people who are known as Salafi feel an obligation to attack Dr. Andani because he is Ismaili, and the denominational how do I put this? The factionalism sometimes imposes itself into what otherwise should be intelligent and good discussions. Um, Luke says I'm more into falafelism. Yeah. So, and I do have to say that, yeah, I certainly feel that there is a an artificial aggrandizement of the Salafi position in the Western imagination that is fueled by a lot of Saudi Arabian money. And so that's inherently going to be unfair to Dr. Andani, and is going to pressure a lot of Muslim YouTubers to, yeah, parsing through Islamic politics. What can I say? I'm trying to be fair, but I also want um, I want our corner of the internet to be welcoming to Muslims, and to include Islamic voices and Muslims in our corner. I think that goes a long way in actually being a um, um, is Saudi Arabia the Islamic equivalent of Kenneth Copeland? I don't know if Kenneth Copeland has a lot of money behind him. Computer is someone who used to be Jewish and he became a Muslim. Apparently, honestly, I have to say, I am very, very skeptical of the claims of a lot of people on the internet to being Jewish or having Jewish background. It is a popular thing to claim. Yeah. If the donors would open up their damn hearts, he would. Look, Saudi Arabia pours a lot of money into a very particular form of Islam that is popular there, and that is what has made it possible for it to grow. And frankly, I think just having serious discussions with actual Muslims on a regular basis, including people like Dr. Andani, is the only way we can really counteract that. Because while money talks, at some point, AstroTurf becomes easy to distinguish from from actual grassroots. By the way, do you know who Sam Shamoon is? Yes, of course I know who Sam Shamoon is. He is a clown. You know what? I am going to go get myself more water. I will be back. Talk amongst yourselves while I am away. Uh, Okay, let's see. Where were we? I don't know if he does, and frankly, if he does have a mental disorder, that makes me feel better about him than what I think he is, which is just a clown. Thank you. I hope that's to me. Sam Shimon literally calls people's names and destroy. Yeah, but that's part of the persona of who he is and what he plays. That's part of his clown act. Aleichem Shalom Muhammad Babeli. You must be new here. Welcome. Who are the Emerald Knights? Emerald Knights is a local game store here in Los Angeles, which I actually used to work at. Emerald Knights. Very much so, Garth. Very much so. Yes. Okay, if people are not going to come on, I might actually do other things like even work. Met you on Khalil's stream. You're extremely respectful. Why, thank you. You're more than welcome to come on my stream. There is StreamYard on the comments, pinned to the comments. But then I took an arrow to the knee. I'm not sure I get that reference, whatever it is. I do have a question. According to Judaism, where is Jesus going to go in the afterlife? That is a good question. It's a common question. I am guessing it is somewhat based on the Talmud in Gittin that everybody I believe it's in Gittin, that everybody always asks me about. According to Judaism, we don't have an official. I see. It's a Skyrim joke. Okay. It is. We don't have an official position on Jesus. And it's not a Jewish thing to have an official position on Jesus. And despite what people may think about that part of the Talmud, it's not really something we like most people consider even an actual teaching. It is a misunderstanding to think that Judaism has an official position on what will happen to Jesus. It is a complete and utter misunderstanding. Well, so I'm waiting for this comment to come up on here. You have to understand, Muhammad, there are references to people who may have been identified with Jesus in the Talmud. So, if those references are actually to the same Jesus, which is debatable, and if those parts of the Talmud are relaying actual information, which is also debatable. And so, like, you have to understand Jewish scholarship is really, really broad. I was actually talking to somebody about it recently, who's interested in learning. I was talking to several people about it, right? And so, if you go searching through all of Jewish scholarship for beliefs about Jesus, you can find things you can argue are about Jesus. And like, I'm not going to deny that you can. I will tell you, the only part of the Talmud that I have found that I think might actually be talking about Jesus is a story of somebody who actually lived 100 years before Jesus is believed by Christians to have lived. And so that's the only story in the Talmud that I actually believe is the Talmud, including something that was possibly factual, but again, it is an absolute mistake. It is a complete mistake to believe that you can take any statement in the Talmud as a any sort of real statement of it, of things that Jews believe. I agree, and ultimately, it's not up to. Yeah, it's not up to us. How do Jewish virtues contrast to Christian values? Good question. I would say most people would say that Judaism is far more concerned with orthopraxy than orthodoxy. What you... It's quite all right, Jason. What you do rather than what you believe. There's a lot of people watching this. Does anybody want to come on? There is a link in the chat. Oh, and like and subscribe, people. How dare you work? I don't believe in work. Jason!
What's up, man?
Oh, you need to get me your email address so I can make you a whatchamacallit on this. Adam of Babylon. I believe Adam is a Muslim. Am I correct, Adam?
Yep, met you on Khalil's stream. It's actually, my name is Mohammed Babeli. I'm on the chat as well.
Oh, so you are Muhammad, and you have a very cute cat, if I believe.
That's true. Yep, that's true.
Anybody who has cute cats is always welcome on my channel, especially a Muslim.
Thank you.
Because I know Muslims don't have dogs, and so if you're not going to be a dog person, you should at least have a cat.
Wait,
That's right.
Wait, Muslims don't have dogs? Is this a real thing?
Yeah, it actually is. It's according to Islam. It's their saliva is impure and you can't pray, so it's just better to not have a dog.
That's
I
a
was
fair
actually
point, I guess.
reading the hadith that says anyone who has a dog not for guarding or livestock or similar purposes loses 1 kirat of their reward in heaven every day. And there's another one which says 2 kirat of their reward. That's apparently 1/12 of your day's wages. So
Right.
yeah.
Never come across the hadith, to be honest, so wouldn't really know.
I was just searching for Muslim views on dogs, and that's what Google told me. So
Yeah.
I might be completely wrong.
I mean, in general, dogs in the house, it prevents angels from inhabiting the house. So that's just something else in Islam.
Yeah. See,
what about ghosts and demons? Does it do that, or is it just
No,
angels?
just the angels.
Oh man, that's a
'Cause
Yeah.
bad
the angels are
dog.
holy.
see, and I
What
say
kind of watchdog is that?
godliness is next to godliness, but I have to say, like, there are statements in the Talmud about dogs and stuff as well, and so there are people who, within Judaism, who are also believe that it is not a Jewish thing to be love dogs as much as I do. Yeah. So, Muhammad, what would you like to talk about?
I had a question in mind earlier, but can't think of it now. Hold on, it's about
Was it about Jesus?
Oh, yeah. Israel. What is the like meaning behind Israel? The name.
It means struggles with God.
Right. So
It
yeah, I've
comes
heard that
from-
before. I didn't really understand what that meant though.
It comes from the story in the Torah. I believe it's Genesis chapter 40. And what happens is that Jacob is, I believe it's during his flight from Esav, and he falls asleep. And in his dream, um, he sees a ladder, and there are angels going up and down. And then, I should probably actually look up the actual verses so I don't start saying stupid things.
Yeah, I think it's when he's going back because he flees and then he sees the ladder, and then I think it's when he revisits that place and he's getting ready to meet Esau again, and then he struggles with the angel. He wrestles with the angel or something, and then
Do you
that's
remember
when
which chapter in Genesis? It's not 40. 40 is way afterwards.
it's I'm not sure exactly. Try 32. That's total guess. Here, hold on. Let me grab my Bible.
Um,
I'm probably wrong. Let's see.
so 33 is, well, 34 is
32.
the story of Dinah.
It's 32.
It's
32,
32.
verse 22 is right around where it starts, I think.
32. Put this up.
Verse 28 is when I think he says he gives him his name, Israel. Yeah, verse 28. But
Okay.
wait. Yeah.
So
22 is where he starts to cross the river and the angel meets him and struggles with him. And then
32, 22?
it was 32:22 is what mine said. Yeah. Wait, no. This is different then. Let's see. Mine says
Usually
30.
they're not that much different.
Verse
Yeah.
28 on mine is one. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
this is where it is. Okay, so 32. Yeah, so this is when he's breaking up his camps, right? He got up that night and took his two wives, his two handmaidens. He then crossed them over the stream. Yaakov remained alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. That is the man, okay, saw that he could not defeat him, and he struck the socket of his hip. Yaakov's hip joint was dislocated as he wrestled with him. He said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." He, Yaakov, said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." He, the man, said to him, "What is your name?" And he replied, "Yaakov." He said, "No longer will your name be spoken of as Yaakov, but as Israel, for you have contended with godly beings." They're saying. I mean, the word is El. Actually, it says Elohim here. Um, and with men, and you have won. Yaakov asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." He said, "Why do you ask my name?" He then blessed him there. Yaakov named the place Peniel, right, face of God, for I have seen, right, it's a Kiraiti Elohim, Panim El Panim, because I have seen God, Elohim, face to face, and my soul has survived. So you have to understand that this certainly does not mean, God forbid, that God has um, a body of
Oh
an
yeah.
instrument.
Oh yeah. No, only
But
a fool would say that.
right, and what it is talking about is the angel he um, that he wrestled was a sort of godly being, a divine being, and so Israel is comes from that idea of struggling with the divine, of struggling with godliness and holiness. Um, yeah.
Okay, yeah. That makes a lot more sense now. I just didn't really know the story behind it. I just knew the name Struggle with God, and I really didn't understand what the whole story was. Now that you clarify, it makes sense. Something else. Elohim. Is that a plural or a singular in Jewish?
Okay, so it is a word that is the plural of the same word that in Arabic is Allah. So
Mhm.
there is a word in Hebrew, Allah, which is singular, which is the same word as Allah in Arabic, and Elohim is the plural of that word, but that word does not only refer to God in the Bible. Um, in fact, even the plural doesn't only refer to God. And when in the Bible it is referring to God, pretty much always it will. There are exceptions which Trinitarians always point to, but um, like 99.999% of the time, it still takes a singular verb, right? So, for example, Genesis 1:1. Let's pull up Genesis 1:1.
It's always the Christians talking about this point, so I had to ask.
My pleasure. So let's look at Genesis 1:1. It says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Right? In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth, and the verb created there is actually in the singular. It's not in the plural. So when we are actually referring to God by the term Elohim, then generally we won't even say it that way. We will say Elohim as opposed to in order not to say it. Whereas when we're referring to it in a profane way, which we do, like there are many places in the Bible where it is obviously not referring to God, like when it says other gods, right? Elohim acherim. And in those cases, we would say it's not a holy use of the term. And when it is not being used in a holy manner, it will have a plural. Um, it will have plural verbs with it, when it is being used in a holy manner, it will have singular verbs, because then it's only referring to the fact that God is in fact, so in the Shema, right? It says Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right? And there it is still in the plural, right? It says that the Lord is our God, but it's in the plural. Our God there is in the plural. God is one, right? So uh, our our God is the totality of all of divinity, is what makes all divinity possible. And that's why the plural of the term, and in a few places God is referred to in this with the singular. There's one particular psalm I'm thinking of where it refers to Eloah Yaakov, which is the God of Jacob, and it uses the singular term. But generally throughout the entirety of the Torah, the the term Elohim, which is in the plural, is used with singular verbs to refer to God.
Right. Okay. And Abraham, is he referred to as lords or Lord? Or I've heard the
Right.
Christians also say that.
So this is an argument Trinitarians make regarding when Abraham, when angels come to visit Abraham, and he says to the angels, Adonai, my masters. And that term is the term which we generally use instead of the tetragrammaton, since we never say the tetragrammaton itself. Instead, we call God by one of his other names, which, so the word Adon, very much like the English word master, which actually the word Mister comes from the same thing, right? Um, so if you're ever in Israel and you want to get like somebody's attention, including the cab driver or something, you would say Adoni, right? My master, my sir, my lord, right? So it's not necessarily weird to refer to somebody politely as Adon, right? Any more than it's weird in English to refer to them as master. I mean, Mr. or master, which is what Mr. really originally meant.
Right.
And the plural of that is actually Adonai, right? My masters, so if you're referring to multiple people as my master, it gets kind of weird, because that is a term, certainly in modern terms, we generally reserve for God. But there are places in the Bible, including that place, where Abraham is talking to several angels, and he says to them, Adonai, my masters. But that's because there's several of them.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Now I was watching a video on it was a Christian apologetic. He had what was it what was it an Assyrian person, and
Okay.
he was like going through the Bible and going through. He was a Trinitarian basically.
Mhm.
He was trying to prove the Trinity through like these things, and it's just I didn't know what they were saying was true or not, because if you're not someone who
The
speaks the
Trinity
language.
is false, and all of the arguments for the Trinity are complete bullshit.
Right. Okay. Oh yeah, now I remember. It's God Logic. If you've heard of him, God Logic.
I have not. No.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, he has a video where it's
No,
basically
Trinitarians try to make this argument all the time, and there's a reason why Trinitarians had to murder people like Michael Severitus, who was a Christian pastor and scholar
Wow.
yeah, if you have not heard of Michael Servetus, sorry, I keep on calling him by the wrong name. But John Calvin had him murdered. He was burnt at the stake. He was, in fact, a doctor and they burnt his books, which included important medical information, which we only found out about when many years later, versions of his books, which were not burnt, were found, but they burnt his books along with him at the stake in Geneva about 500 years ago because he denied the Trinity, and he was a very religious Christian. And the way Christianity, the Trinitarian Christians, were able to keep knowledgeable people from denying the Trinity was by murdering them.
Right.
And it's that reign of terror. I mean, if they had good arguments, they wouldn't have to resort to murder. That's it's a simple rule of faith. If you have to murder somebody, then you don't have a good argument.
That's true. Yeah. That's crazy. Didn't know they were that violent.
Trinitarians have murdered far more Christians for not believing in the Trinity than they've murdered Jews for not believing in Christianity. And I would say probably even more than, well, certainly long time ago. I mean, over the past 100, 200 years, there have been massacres of Christians in Islamic lands that did not happen before. And certainly, I mean, over the last 50 years, the massacres of Christians in Muslim lands have been completely abnormal and not in keeping with Muslim history. But you know, before it was Christians murdering mostly Christians for not believing in the Trinity. And honestly, those Muslims who today are killing mostly Muslims for not agreeing with them, but also Christians for not agreeing with them, they are taking up the where Christianity left off. And I would say it is Christian innovations coming into Islam, because 100 years ago, 200, certainly over 200 years ago, we have no history of the violent Islamism in Islamic lands killing Christians that takes place today.
Yeah. 100%.
So Adam, tell me something about yourself. Who are you?
I'm not really that interesting, but I live in Ireland.
Oh wow.
I'm originally Syrian. I speak
Okay.
Arabic fluently.
So you were raised a Muslim?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
But I did leave Islam basically. I was atheist for a while, a few years. Yeah, I think it was just a phase that we all have. You don't, you think, oh, this religion, oh, it's just, old people and their religion, they don't know what they're talking about. But then when you actually just you take a deep dive into who you actually are and where you come from, then oh wait, there's a creator.
I don't mean to dox you, but around how old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
Okay, you're pretty young.
Yeah, I am. Still in college.
Very interesting. And so I'm assuming you're not married yet.
Oh no.
Get married early.
Yeah.
May I ask what you're studying?
Mechanical engineering.
So you're a smart one too.
That's debatable.
Well, if it's not debatable if you haven't flunked out of your course yet.
Yeah. No, that could be right. Yeah.
And how large is the Muslim community where you are?
Recently there's been a boom because of the Syrian war, the
Oh,
refugees
I
that
see.
came. So that's a big reason why. Before, it was mostly Pakistanis when they came to the UK and Ireland. This
Mhm.
was the about, I don't know, maybe, so 40 years ago was when it was a huge, burst of Muslims in here. But before, there was basically zero. Like Ireland, just it was just all of it is Catholic. Well, not Catholic, all of it, but it has a huge Catholic population.
Mhm. Aren't most Syrians Alawite?
No, it's just they have the seats in government, so they make up the basically the government is Alawite, but 90% of the people are actually Sunni.
Oh, okay. Um,
Maybe not 90, maybe 80. But
okay.
there's Sufi and there's a Shiite in Syria. There's quite a large
Mhm.
amount of
Right.
them.
And the Alawites are Shia.
Yeah, they're from the Shia sect.
Okay. And as far as Sunni, what is the as like which school of
Right.
Islam?
Okay. Uh, Sunnis, mostly it's just like, how do I say it? Just normal Sunni. This is not really a way to say it, but the I don't know. It's like, I think you guys also have that. There's just the normal ones that don't really have
Yeah.
a name, that are on the right path, and then there's others. So there's the Sufis as well. They're they have a quite a large population there. Well, actually, Syrians are probably most known for Sufism.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is your family, may I ask, Sunni or
Yeah, it's
Sufi, or
Sunni. Yeah,
they're Sunni?
Sunni.
And were you here earlier when we were speaking with Dr. Andani about Salafism in Saudi Arabia and stuff like that?
No, but I saw his comment, so I know he was here. But I didn't check what he said.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, we were talking about. There is no steel manning the Trinitarian position, Garth. I'm sorry. Um, this is part of why I say that 1 = 3 will end you with 2 + 2 equals 5. The reason I believe we have Clown World and we have the kind of craziness and um, incapacity to stand up to what is obviously wrong. For example, cutting off the genitals of little children. Um, I would say is because of this idea that every position can be steelmanned. And I think that the Trinity is, in fact, at the heart, it's the theological heart of why American culture is not able to stand up to things which are patently ridiculous. Because if you can't stand up to something as patently ridiculous as the Trinity, if you have to be like, well, that's your belief, it's fine, you can, I will not, because that's your belief, I'm going to be nice to it, and I'm going to pretend that it has some capacity of being reasonable, then that's what leads you down the path of where we are now, where people say such crazy things as there is no such thing as a man or a woman, right? And that's part of the reason I am so adamantly opposed to the idea of the Trinity. Um, 1 = 3 implies partialism, which most Christians don't affirm in the Trinity. Well, this is part of the problem. When you get down to the Trinity, when you get down to actually talking about the Trinity, um, you end up going really deep into details and having these philosophical discussions that honestly most people are not capable. I think latest surveys say that 90% of Trinitarian Christians, people who say they believe in the Trinity, believe in some form of official heresy. I mean, that's just a fact. So yes, the Trinity is in fact incoherent, and any way you describe it is going to, for a vast majority of people, make them think about something that is ridiculous and stupid and crazy, and that's just how the Trinity is. I'm sorry.
Well,
We we can't go around pretending like there is a logical position of the Trinity. There is not. If you're going to tell me, like, for example, Father Eric does, I don't understand the Trinity. This is what the church teaches. I believe what the church teaches, and so I believe it. Okay, that is a position which I have no response to. It's like, okay, you believe things because your church tells you to believe them, and that is your position. And because I believe in religious freedom, I'm perfectly fine with that. But that cannot be the same thing as making me kowtow and say, oh yes, there is a way of steel manning this ridiculous thing that you believe because of your religion, because that is the road to perdition. That is the road to 2 + 2 = 5. um,
well,
the way I would explain it is that at the ground of existence there is God. God then reflects himself as a whole on different levels through different persons. Okay, so the Neoplatonic position, which I agree with, and Dr. Andani I probably agrees with, I'm guessing, and what is understandable is there is the problem of the one and the many, which is an ancient um, philosophical problem, which is also a theological problem, right? And so, if you are talking in terms of the Trinity about the persons of God representing God, right? So you can talk about persons of God in Trinitarian language, and in that manner, then you could actually say that Judaism believes in a multi-personal God, and this is what this is an argument that Father Stephen DeYoung makes, and it's a argument that Pastor Tanner made very well on my channel, and I am fine with the concept of a multi-personal God when you understand that that a person of God is a representation of God, is not God himself, right? To confuse a person of God with God is in fact idolatry.
I have a
And
question.
yeah.
Sorry. To kind of interject there. There's this weird part in the Gospels where Jesus, it says the Jews get mad at Jesus because he claims to be God, and then he says something like, "Why are you mad at me because I say I'm a son of God?" So is there like a traditional understanding where if you say you're a son of God, it's the equivalent to saying you are God?
Well, in a sense, I mean, I mean, look at the background of my, like, there is a reason why I have this background on my oops, sorry. There's a reason why I have this background on my thing.
Yeah.
Genesis 1 tells us that we as human beings were created in the image of God. We, in
Yeah.
fact, represent God in the world, right? And that
Uh-huh.
that is a genuine teaching of Judaism, and it's always been a teaching of Judaism. And in fact, I believe it's a teaching of Judaism that the Quran takes Jews to task for I would say misunderstanding, because if you then believe, hey Chad, how you doing? If you then believe that a presentation of God, a representation of God, a person of God, right? And I'm not using the word person in the modern way. I'm using it in the Trinitarian way, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you then actually believe that that person is God, you have committed idolatry. And
Okay.
the Quran is absolutely correct in saying that if you view it that way, you are in fact. So when I go to synagogue and they bring the Torah out. I kiss the Torah, I bow towards the Torah. Why? Because the Torah is something that God has given me, and by giving respect and veneration to the Torah scroll, I am doing it as a form of respect and veneration towards God.
Okay.
Now, if I were to actually believe, God forbid, that I am actually kissing God, like that Torah scroll. So, if a Torah scroll, God forbid, were to fall on the ground, were to be destroyed in some way, this is considered a very horrible thing in Judaism. People will fast if they see such things, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a very deep respect for this thing which God has given us, which is His Word, right? And in a sense, His Word is a revelation of Him in the world, and requires that sort of respect. And it becomes a representation of God in the world. But when you mistake that representation of God for God Himself, you have committed idolatry.
Okay. I kind of see what you're saying. Yeah, there's just this weird. I mean, it's a very close connection. It seems like between God's creation of mankind and God Himself in Christianity, where He says, like, if you can't love your brother whom you have seen, how can you possibly love God who you haven't seen? Because
Look,
so it's
this is,
and I think it's
Yeah.
kind of related to the Jacob story, Israel story earlier, because like when he struggles with the angel, it's very, very similar to him struggling with Esau, because he struggles with Esau in the womb, takes him by the heel. He struggles with the angel, like takes hold of the angel, won't let him go. And it's like, there's this weird, very close association and parallel. And then to the angel, he says, I've seen God's face. And then after that, he sees his brother Esau. Esau forgives him, and he says, I see your face like I've seen God's face. And it's just like this, where
let's take it out of the human. Let's. I am deliberately taking it out of the human thing, right?
yeah,
When we talk about the Word of God, God revealing Himself in the world through His Torah, right? Through His Word and His revelation, right? Whatever that revelation is, it cannot, Chad asks a very good question. Can we know the mind of God? And the Bible says quite clearly, my thoughts are not your thoughts, right? God is not like us. God is so removed from us. It's like an ant trying to understand, like, how does an ant understand a human being? An ant has no capacity to understand a human being. But God, in revealing Himself to us, is in fact constricting Himself into something finite by revealing Himself to us in any way whatsoever. And part of the reason why it's so important in Judaism, this teaching of the ineffable nature of God, right? Why do I write G-D instead of writing God? Why do I not even try to say the Tetragrammaton, right? It is a self-referential way of recognizing that whatever I understand of God is, in fact, fails to contain God, because God is infinite and we are finite and our understanding is finite. And through that ineffable nature, by not saying the Tetragrammaton, I am in fact acknowledging that I cannot truly understand God at all. And that is an important part of understanding that the revelations of God are, yes, important and great, and they improve us incredibly because they are a spark of the infinite in this finite world, right?
yeah.
So, I think you can take it way too far and say, well, yeah, no human being represents God in the world, but then you you take it too far, and you will have no representations of God in the world. You will have no respect for God's word and how God has in fact revealed himself to us in the world.
Okay.
To know
Yeah.
God, you must be God. If you know
To
that.
know God truly, you must be God. And so we must always have the humility of understanding that our understanding of God is in fact flawed.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm always going on about this, but I'm like always hitting on forgiveness and stuff, and not in a form of flattery, but like forgiveness with repentance, where you talk about David and stuff. And I feel like that's always the closest way to know God,
Have you?
and where when I see Him reflected in humanity. Like there was this one time, my nephew, gosh, I don't know how old he is now. He was probably like 6 at the time, and I don't even know what he did. He just asked me a question or something, and I was frustrated, and so I kind of lost my temper a little bit. And then I apologized to him, and he forgave me. And it was like that moment. I feel like was one of the closest moments I get to like the spirit of God or something, because it was like this innocent child did not. I did not deserve forgiveness, especially not from him. I mean, it was just the smallest little thing, but just seeing that, like that's what I feel like when Jacob said to his brother, "I see your face, like I see God's face." Like in that moment, you feel
Okay.
like I don't know.
Have I already sent you to the Tomer Devorah, the date palm of Deborah?
I maybe I don't know all these names. I don't know all these
Okay,
these words.
so there is a book called Tomer Devorah. The English of that is Deborah's date palm, and Dr. Henry Abramson, who has a YouTube channel, he actually wrote a book explaining it, and he has a video series on YouTube explaining it. And it is so beautiful about God's um, God's aspect of forgiveness. I highly recommend it. It's like considered a classic in Judaism, and I
What
think
is
you would really love it.
what's it again? I'm gonna Google it
Let
right
me
now.
find it, and I'll put the
Okay.
link in the thing.
And no blood sacrifice is necessary for the forgiveness.
No blood sacrifice is necessary for forgiveness. Yes, this is true.
Is that also a thing in Judaism, or is it just in Christianity? You don't have any kind of concept like that.
So I had a discussion with hold on, let me find this, and then I will address what you're saying.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. The name of, so I am going to put the link into the chat.
Got it.
Not sure it's going to do people a lot of good. Let me also put it into the description on YouTube. And this is the name of the series by Dr. Henry Abramson is The Kabbalah of Forgiveness. And there is a playlist with 16 videos where he goes in and explains this book and his book on the book, which I highly recommend. Okay, so that's as far as that. As far as what Mohammed asked about blood forgiveness. I had a discussion about it with Jeff, who is Sam Adams's father, on my channel, and I recommend that regarding blood atonement. I have to say, in Judaism, as a response to what Christians say about blood atonement, there has been a very strong reaction. And I don't want to downplay the aspects that there are of the actual sacrifices, which are not completely without any value in Judaism. Obviously, the Torah does talk about bringing sacrifices and does talk about the value of them. But it's not the way Christians say it is. And the arguments that the
We're
book of
always running
Hebrews
amok.
brings from that the book of Hebrews brings from the Jewish Bible regarding places where it says God does not want sacrifices. That's part of our Bible. God says quite clearly in the Bible he does not want sacrifices, and a proper understanding of the book of Isaiah explains exactly why God does not want sacrifices, and how much more so, and how incredibly crazy is it that I have to say God would never accept a human sacrifice. That is disgusting. It is wrong. And anybody who believes in the sacrifice of an innocent human being in a is in some way an atonement for his own sins is committing blasphemy, and God will judge you for that. And it is a horrible thing for anybody to say. And I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody that, God forbid, wants to, believes that they will come on the Yom Hadin, on the day of judgment, before God and say, my sins are absolved because an innocent person suffered for my sins. I think God's answer to them will be Ezekiel 18, where God says very much that he is in fact just, and it is wrong for anybody to say that God is unjust and will cause the innocent to suffer for the guilty, as opposed to punish the guilty for their sins and reward the innocent for their good acts and the good for the good that they do. And so penal substitutionary atonement is completely heretical, is completely unacceptable, and it, I I worry about my friends, my Christian friends who believe in penal substitutionary atonement, because God forbid if they die with this belief and come to God with such blasphemies, I shudder to think of the punishment that there is for believing in such things. Because as Jesus says, it is a very Jewish belief that God will judge you by the standards which you believe are fair. And if you believe that it is fair that the innocent should suffer for the guilty, how much more so will it be fair that you as the guilty person should suffer for your own guilt?
And
Penal
does this
substitutionary atonement is completely blasphemous. Go ahead, Mohammed.
does this also include? So you were speaking about humans, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So does this?
The idea that sacrifice of a human being would be acceptable to God is completely blasphemous, and God have mercy on the souls of anyone who believes such things.
Right. We have in Islam, we have sacrificing animals, of course, for eating, right? So you,
Right.
right.
Korbanot, yeah.
Yeah.
Korban.
Also the kaparot, right?
Right.
So in Yom Kippur, does this also like what is your take on it?
Okay, so one of the reasons I was actually, even when I was very involved with Orthodox Judaism and much more observant than I am right now, one of the reasons I was actually opposed to the actual practice of kaparot was because I thought, and I still think, that the vast majority of Jews who engage with it have a view of it which is in fact idolatrous and wrong. The reason we do kaparot, the reason for watching an animal suffer, and that ceremony of seeing an animal put to death, is for us to understand the message that we deserve death for our sins, and that we ask God for forgiveness, and we need to ask for God for forgiveness, or we would deserve such things, such as our throat being slit, our blood being spilled, to
Okay.
happen to us, right?
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, many people misunderstand it in ways that I think are in fact blasphemous, and which I think the book of Isaiah very clearly condemns. Chapter 1 and 2 of Isaiah very clearly, and actually the entirety of the book of Isaiah, 1 through 66, condemns this view of it. And in fact, in Orthodox Judaism, the people who are knowledgeable will say that the reason we believe the temple was destroyed and we do not have the temple is because people would bring sacrifices in this transactional manner, believing that somehow their sins are being transferred to an animal or to somebody else. And that's why the Bible very clearly, many times, Hosea in Psalms, over and over, will say, no, this is not what the sacrifices were for, and this is why the temple was in fact destroyed. And why we have no sacrifices today is because people would make this mistake. And it is such a terrible mistake. It is better for nobody to bring sacrifices than for anybody to bring a sacrifice under believing that somehow they are paying God. They are that it's completely like it says in Isaiah 66. I have created the world. What is the house you will build for me? What are you going to what are you going to give me? I am the creator of the world. Let me read Isaiah 66 because I just think it's so important here.
Yeah.
Isaiah 66. It says, "Thus said the Lord, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where could you build a house for me? What place could serve as my abode? All this was made by my hand, and thus it all came into being, declares the Lord. Yet to such a one I look, to the poor and broken-hearted, who is concerned about my word. And for those who slaughter oxen and slay humans, who sacrifice sheep and immolate dogs, who present an oblation, the blood of as oblation, the blood of swine, who offer incense and worship false gods, just as they have chosen their ways and take pleasure in their abomination, so will I choose to mock them, to bring on them the very thing they dread. For I called and none responded. I spoke and none paid heed. They did what I deem evil and chose what I do not want. Hear the word of the Lord, you who are concerned about his word. Your kinsmen who hate you, who spurn you because of me, are saying, let the Lord manifest his presence so that we may look upon your joy. But theirs shall be the shame. Hark, tumult from the city, thunder from the temple. It is the thunder of the Lord as he deals retribution to his foes. Before she labored, she was delivered. Before her pangs came, she bore a son. Who ever heard the like? Who ever witnessed such events? Can a land pass through travail in a single day, or is a nation born all at once? Yet Zion travailed and at once bore her children. Shall I who bring on labor not bring about birth, said the Lord? Shall I who cause birth shut the womb, said the Lord? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her, all you who love her. Join in her jubilation, all you who mourned over her, that you may suck from her breast consolation to the full, that you may draw from her bosom glory to your delight. For thus said the Lord, I will extend to her prosperity like a stream, the wealth of nations like a wadi in flood. And you shall drink of it, you shall be carried on shoulders and dandled upon knees. As a mother comforts her son, so I will comfort you. You shall find comfort in Jerusalem. You shall see, and your heart shall rejoice. Your limbs shall flourish like grass. The power of the Lord shall be revealed in behalf of his servants, but he shall rage against his foes. And I mean, you can the entirety of the book of Isaiah, like this, is explaining. It is about turning towards God, and the destruction of the temple came about because people were bringing sacrifices with this idea that they are going to somehow give God something. This is absolutely wrong and absolutely unacceptable in Judaism, and the prophets have said so many, many times. I don't know how many times I can say it.
Right. Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Mohammed?
No, it's a great take on it.
Okay. Okay, so Kodiak Wanab says one book says monotheism, another book says Trinitarianism. Which book is right? Why take any ancient book as the word of God? Why believe someone else's revelation, and how do you decide? First and foremost, I would say pray. Pray directly to God. Say to God, God, if you exist, I want to know you. I want to know what is right. And then genuinely seek God. And there is a reason why ancient books are ancient. And I will say one thing. You will not find the Trinity anywhere in the Christian Bible. It is nowhere in the Christian Bible whatsoever. Okay? So the idea that you will find Trinitarianism in the Christian Bible is absolutely wrong. And I defy anybody to find the Trinity in the Christian Bible. But that's beside the point. If it doesn't make sense, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Pray to God, search for God, and looking through books of ancient wisdom is one good way of gaining wisdom. So go ahead and do a real search. And during that search, pray. Pray to God. And ultimately, know that you as a human being will never know God fully because that's impossible. But you can turn towards God. And that's all you can do is turn towards God. Did you want to say something, Mohammed?
Actually, now that I remember, we have something. I think since you spoke with Dr. Adnani, just with the Athari and Ashari discussion, if you know what I'm talking about, between affirming God's attributes.
Oh yeah, this is what Michael Sartori. So Michael says God was a lot more powerful before the rabbis discovered all the stuff he can't do. I don't know about the Athari and Ashari, but what I will say is there is no theologian I am aware of whatsoever who would say that God can create a stone so heavy he cannot lift it. I am not aware of any, maybe open theists, but open theism is also a joke. But anybody who actually believes in a sensible understanding of omnipotence does not believe that that means God can do ridiculous things. So I'm sorry if that makes your life difficult, but no, I am not aware of anybody, any credible theologian, including Protestant theologians like William Lane Craig, who try to, in fact, um, defend the Trinity, although he's had to come up with a new version of the Trinity in order to do so, which should tell you something. That will say that God can do anything. That's just a bad understanding. You missed a lot, Garth, but welcome back. Hello, flummoxed rat. I don't know who you are. Random thought. Forgiven because God ate his own word. Not sure what you mean. What's your thoughts on a moral influence atonement? I have never heard of moral influence atonement. Although, if I am going to parse it, I would say that it may be very similar to the video I had on the calculus of the cross. And if that is, great. I might have to hop off here in a few minutes, guys. Sorry. I got to meet some dudes at 9. Love you, Jacob. And it was great to meet you, Adam. His name is actually Muhammad. I don't know why he goes by Adam.
It's
Muhammad.
both, actually. It's my middle name, so it's Muhammad Adam Babeli.
Muhammad Adam is your... Aha. So that's why.
Yeah.
So we can call him M.A.
Yes, sir.
What kind of punishment awaits Christians when they come before God? An infinitely just and merciful one.
Great answer.
For their blasphemies, an infinitely just and merciful one. My seeking and prayerful attempt at understanding God tells me a loving, merciful, just God isn't going to punish people for innocently held, even wrong and ridiculous beliefs. I agree with you 100%. God will be just. God knows your heart. God knows what capacities you have. God knows why you believe the things you do. And if you honestly believe in the Trinity, then I want you to honestly believe in the Trinity, and I want you to continue to, Garth says, bye, may the Trinity be with you. If you honestly believe in the Trinity, then look, pray to God for truth. And this is, I believe in freedom of religion because I actually believe in God. If you actually believe in God, it's very easy to believe in freedom of religion because because my God can defend himself and can punish the wicked himself. And, I need to be a good person. I don't need to police what is in your brain, in your heart, right? Like it says, Hanistarot Lashem Alakenu, Vahaniglaot Lanu Lavanenu Lasotam. Those things which are hidden belong to the Lord our God, and those which are revealed belong to us and our children so that we may keep them. And so if what is in your heart, that's up to you. And if you genuinely believe in the Trinity, first of all, I want to try to understand you. And if you're right, I want if it is actually true that the Trinity is true, I want God to reveal that to me because I want God to reveal the truth to me. At the same time, I think it's obvious, and I think Christians know it's obvious that the Trinity is false, which is why they had to resort to why make the threat? I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where he did a threat. Threat of like judgment, maybe? Not too sure.
Well, I mean, I do believe. Look, out of only out of a concern do I say that yes, God will. Sorry, Jacob, I can't stand when people make heavenly threats for not believing in their flavor of God. Okay, I believe God will, in fact, punish people um, who believe in blasphemies, because the truth will be revealed. God will, I believe, in the punishment of the wicked and the reward of the good, and that is something I leave to God. And out of a genuine concern, I will tell you when I think you are doing something which is going to result in something bad happening to you, and that is out of a genuine concern. I don't want people to make mistakes, but ultimately, you know, and I will say it far more about people who murder people, right? If you murder people, you are, in fact, God is going to punish you. I believe that 100%. So I'm not some sort of subjectivist, believe whatever you want type of person at all. At all. I believe there is right and wrong, and I believe that what is right and wrong is dictated by God, and that God has revealed that to us, and that God does reveal that to us. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not a subjectivist. That's for sure. I believe there is an objective reality, and I believe that if you do wrong, you will be punished. Um, if you are lucky in this world, and if not, in the next, because I do believe that God is in fact just. If people's seeking of God leads them to blasphemy, if their genuinely held a belief brings people to God and God punishes them, even enough to warrant a threat and warning, is that a good God? I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying at all. That I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying at all. If people, God will punish you for God will punish you for choosing to believe things that are comfortable as opposed to things which are true.
Yeah, yeah. Following your own desires, basically.
Yeah, and ultimately, the Trinity is people following their own desires, because um, it's very difficult to be a Christian Unitarian. It's very, very difficult. Ask Sam. He has been thrown out of church after church after church. And the persecution of Unitarians by Trinitarians, look, Michael Servetus, how Sir, Servetus, yeah, Michael Servetus, right? Um, he was murdered by um, John Calvin for denying the Trinity, and he was burnt at the stake. This is one of the pictures that people have drawn of him um, of him being murdered for his denial of the Trinity. And he was not the only person to be treated this way. So, yeah, look, and he was a Christian. He was completely, he was a Christian who was murdered by John Calvin for his belief for his denial of the Trinity, and for no other reason. And he was a doctor, and he was a good person, and I highly recommend everybody learning more about him and his life and his legacy and his theology. Because of his rejection of the Trinity and eventual execution by burning for heresy, Unitarians often regard Servetus as the first modern Unitarian martyr. I mean, what exactly? He 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 was murdered, and I think Trinitarians need to repent of that. But they also need to understand that today they, while they are not murdering Unitarians, they do very much enforce Trinitarianism, and if they didn't, it would fall apart because vast majority of people know that it is ridiculous and they don't understand it, and they just kowtow to it because they have to. Garth, I think why the Trinity is so compelling for most Christians is that while it itself will always be a mystery, it satisfies the crucifixion of Christ while also giving us the Holy Spirit within us. Honestly, there's a lot of reasons why I think Trinitarians hold on to the Trinity. One of them, very plainly, is they don't want to get kicked out of their church. Another one is that they think that a rejection of the Trinity requires them to believe that Jesus was a liar or a bad person, or and frankly, I think that's out of ignorance as well, because Jesus never taught the Trinity at all. And I think for a lot of people, this is what they were raised with. This is what they know, and they giving up what they know for nothing, right? You're just robbing them of their church. And I don't want to simply rob people of their church. I believe there is a better way. I think that if Christian churches stopped enforcing this belief in the Trinity, I think people would give it up. And look, vast majority of people who believe in the Trinity, when you actually ask them to describe the Trinity, they will describe something that their church will call a heresy. How is that a good thing for Christianity? That's why I made the distinction of genuinely held belief. You must think Christians are choosing to ignore the truth of Judaism. No, look, we don't evangelize. We don't teach. We don't go out there trying to teach people about Judaism, because it is against our religion, and it is against our religion, which is part of the reason I have to be careful how I do things on my channel, and I still get accused of evangelism, which if it is true, then I am honestly sorry for, and I am trying to not step over that line. At the same time, I think that for the vast majority of Christian history, the vast majority of Christians had no access even to their own Bible at all. Christianity did not bother to teach people how to read their Bible and understand it. And I think that is it's a very new thing that Christians have had a Bible that they can read, and it's an even newer thing that they can read the Old Testament. So I think there is a reason why so many Christians are turning away from the Trinity, and we do see many Christians turning away from the Trinity. Alhamdulillah. I will say that if the Trinity is not well explained to someone, they do not have any obligation to believe in it. I have yet to see the Trinity well explained. No, like a few people. Pastor Tanner, I think, genuinely believes in the Trinity. vast majority of Christians I have spoken to, if they understand anything about the Trinity at all, they would say that their understanding is either it's a mystery, I don't understand it, and I believe it because that's what my church teaches, or they will express some form of heresy, which is actually what William Lane Craig does, which is the funny part. He's come up um, with his new version of the Trinity, which he claims is a logical, biblical Trinity, but it's modalism. Um, I would say that dialogue does not equal evangelizing. I would hope so, but it's some people would. I have certainly been accused of evangelizing, and people do it on a regular basis, and it is against my religion.
It is?
Yes, evangelizing is against Judaism. Because it shows a lack of belief in God to try to go to somebody else um, and say to them, "Hey, I understand God. You don't. You are."
Oh,
Yeah. So
okay.
it's like,
Yeah. No, I
yeah,
get
it is not something we engage in at all. It's not something we've never engaged in at all. If somebody comes and asks questions, that itself is a like, how do you answer them is because you have to also be very careful, right?
Mm.
Because ultimately they have to have a relationship with God, and God knows what he's doing, and God knows how to reveal himself to each person. Even within Judaism, there are people who will say that within Judaism, one Jew saying to another Jew, "Hey, you should believe this," is in fact a something that is forbidden, and it has been a I mean it is a contentious issue in Judaism if Jews should go to other Jews and say, which I disagree with. I actually believe that it's perfectly fine for Jews to say to other Jews because we are part of the same community. um, but even that is controversial within Judaism. But there is a complete agreement that evangelizing, like trying to go seek out converts to Judaism, is completely forbidden, and this has biblical roots. I mean, you see in the book of Ruth when Ruth says to Naomi that when Ruth says to Naomi, I wish to go with you, that in fact, sorry about that ambulance going by my office, Naomi tries to dissuade her. And when people do come to us and they want to join the Jewish community, in fact, it is a very long and difficult process in which the rabbis sincerely try to convince you to go about your life as a Gentile, not part of the Jewish community, believing in God and living a good life as a good person, not necessarily taking on all of the additional things that go along with Judaism, uh, because we do not believe that it is necessary to be Jewish um, in order to be a good person. And in fact, there are people who are not Jewish who are far better people than people who are Jewish. Um, being Jewish has a priesthood component to it, and we do accept converts into our community, but we do not encourage it. It is not something that we are that we do. Jacob has been hanging out with Calvinists too much. Okay, I've spoken too much. You start talking, Mohammed.
Okay. Let's see. Right. Yeah. God. What's your view on what God is or who God is? Like, to you, what is God?
Well, you tell me, what is God? Who is God?
Okay. Um, God. Well, according to Islam, He's the Creator, the most merciful, the most what was it? The most merciful. Yeah. Created everything, and I was just earlier in I think you showed me Isaiah, book of Isaiah, and he says he created the heavens and the earth with his hand, right? With his hand. So would you take that as literal or as a metaphor? He created
It's
with
metaphorical. God does not have an actual hand.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, this is what you were referring to. Sorry.
Yeah.
God says, "What is the house you can build me?" Um, right. The and the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. And in other places, it does talk about God's hands, and God's feet, and God's back, and God's face. All of these things are metaphors because um, we can only understand God in imperfect revelations that He gives us. Any understanding we have of God is in fact imperfect. Um, hey, Bazani, you should just click on the thing and come on.
Hello.
Um, and um, yeah, so we would say all of that is metaphorical, and in fact, ultimately, we say that even when we talk about God's names, and this is the reason why we don't say the Tetragrammaton at all. Um, okay, Bazani, I'm not putting that on the screen, even though it is kind of
That is funny. No, you're right.
um, this goes into why we don't say God's name and we refer to God obliquely, is the acknowledgement that even when we say things like, God is good, right? That does not mean good is God. God is love, but that does not mean love is God. God is wise, but that does not mean wisdom is God, right? Anything we can say to God, in fact, fails to completely encompass and capture God.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you. There's just no way of putting God into words. 100%.
Well, okay, so this gets into the whole Salafi thing. Do you consider yourself a Salafi?
Not fully. No. There's some things I disagree with, but I'm still learning. I'm still reading, trying to find what's the truth, what
So,
sounds
what
right.
what do you disagree with, for example?
It's just the whole hand thing. It just doesn't make sense for God to have a hand. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. But there's so many people that I see as they're more knowledgeable than me who would actually take the position and say that he does have a hand. So
Well, yeah. I mean, Salafi. I mean, so what do you think of Dr. Andani?
I disagree with his Neoplatonic view. I think there's some attributes that God innately has in his essence, and it's not all just is a byproduct of the singular. I don't know what they would call it, but God as a singular. So they believe his knowledge, or sorry, his knowledge was created. So God created his knowledge, and he became knowledgeable. So like things like that, it doesn't really fit into my kind of natural intellect. I guess it just doesn't seem right to me. So
Yeah. So in Judaism we have um, what we call the esoteric tradition or the Kabbalah and things like that, right? And the analogy I make is that when you start learning math, right? In the beginning, you learn 2 plus 2 equals 4, and 6 times 6 is 36, and you just learn arithmetic, right? And then you learn algebra, so you learn y equals mx plus b, right? And you learn to deal with variables and things like that. And then when you get into higher math, right, you start talking about derivatives and things like that. And so we do have in Judaism a belief that things which are fundamental can are a necessary prerequisite for things which are further beyond. And that's why we have an esoteric tradition. And when we talk about some of these things which people would call Neoplatonism, like the distinction between God and his wisdom, right? So, in a sense, making a distinction between God and his wisdom can be misunderstood as if there are some sort of, and there are people who like, so it gets into arguments, and so we say that these types of things are certainly not fundamentals of the faith. The fundamentals of the faith are um, are the basic things, the arithmetic. And once you learn the arithmetic, we certainly encourage you to look further and start learning what I would say is like the algebra, which is, you know, the Talmud and the Midrash. And once you have some grounding in those, I would recommend learning more and looking into things which people would refer to as the Kabbalah. But I would say, and one of the reasons I like the things that Dr. Andani says, and one of the reasons that I am actually an advocate of Neoplatonism, is because when you look, you will see that a lot of the advanced scholars of Islam, advanced scholars of Christianity, advanced scholars of Judaism, in fact, very much fit into the Neoplatonic tradition, and the types of things that Plotinus said were very influential to, for example, the Muslim scholar Avicenna, who is very broadly accepted in thing. And so, what I would say is, you know, I would take a um, I would take a more agnostic position if I were you,
Yeah.
just because you know I hear this a lot, because Judaism does have some very Neoplatonic ideas which sound very strange and counterintuitive. And when somebody says that to me, especially when they are only starting out in their theology, I will basically say, you know what? I think it is a mistake to try to understand calculus or algebra if you don't know your arithmetic. And I don't mean this to sound condescending. You yourself said you're just starting out and
Oh, yeah.
you don't very advanced thing. Because one thing that sometimes it appears, right, when you start talking about what I would call, you know, the advanced math, right, when we start talking, for example, about imaginary numbers, right, the square root of one, -1, right,
Mm.
if you only know um, arithmetic, you're like, but you know, like what a square root is, you're like, there is no square root of there is no number that you can multiply by itself that it will become thing. But I it also doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I know that everybody who's like into advanced mathematics says, yeah, imaginary numbers are very useful. And I would say a similar thing applies to a lot of Neoplatonic ideas. These are ideas that I I find very faith affirming, that advanced that the greatest leaders in Judaism do accept, and very prominent leaders in Christianity and Islam have accepted, because I do think they do point to God, a one God who does reveal himself to people. And from my studies, I fully affirm what I understand of Neoplatonism.
Right. And what do you think are the kind of arithmetic level of Neoplatonism? Like, what's the starting point of knowing?
Well, I would say, if of any religion, the arithmetic level is to start with prayer, to start with actual prayer practices of, on a regular basis, just praying,
Hmm.
of studying the basic scriptures and knowing your scriptures well, right? So for a lot of people who have problems with, for example, the idea that God is not his own wisdom, right? Um, I find that more familiarity with the Jewish scriptures certainly starts showing you that there are places where it's not exactly the same. Like when God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Well, what does that mean? My thoughts are not your thoughts, right? Or when it talks about the wisdom of God in an embodied way, right? Which does happen within the wisdom literature, right? I believe it's in Ecclesiastes, right? I don't know who Euthyphro is. The definitions of God, right? When we say anything about God, right, it becomes very difficult when we talk about God's hand, right? What does it mean, God's hand? But we have to talk about God's hand or God's throne, and these are things which, in fact, our scriptures do talk about. And I think once you have a deeper and real understanding of scripture, and after spending some time praying, how long have you how long have you been actually engaging with Islam seriously?
Me,
Yeah,
maybe about a year now.
that's not a lot of time.
Yeah, no, it definitely is not. Before, actually, for maybe 10 years, no, more than 10 years. 12 years. When I was 12 years old, I decided to become atheist. But it was
Mhm.
just 1 year ago is when I, came back to Islam.
So you have a grounding in it,
Yeah,
and that family grounding is important.
yeah.
One thing I like to point out to people a lot is that, what cognitive science has absolutely taught us is there's not enough computing capacity inside your skull to actually run your body. That we know for a fact. Like, ask any cognitive scientist. What our consciousness, and that's why if you are alone, you will lose your mind. You will most definitely lose your mind if it's just you, because a human being needs other human beings for what's called distributed cognition, right? We actually outsource a lot of our cognition to other people. And you see that in yourself. You learned English. How did you learn English? You learned it by talking to other people. And, you know, uh, when your first language, I'm assuming, was Arabic, right?
Hmm.
When you first learned Arabic, just by listening to other people talk. And so we outsource our thinking to the people who are around us much more than we actually recognize. And it's, if we outsource that well, if we recognize that we're talking to people who are know what they're talking about, who we find good sources who are able to teach us, then we are able to stand on the shoulders of giants. We are able to um, what I tell my nephews a lot is a an intelligent person learns from his mistakes. A wise person learns from other people's mistakes.
Mm.
It's very nice to be very smart and to think for yourself, but what's really even better, no thank you, what is even better than to think for yourself is to think with other people. Think about how you think with other people, to consume books, to read, to talk to people who are genuine, truthful people with various views. And that actually makes you so much stronger than somebody who thinks for himself. Now, I'm not telling you not to think, I'm telling you to think, but don't think by yourself. Think with other people, get their thoughts. And when you actually consider it, I mean, yes, of course, it makes a lot of sense that we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, and that different people know different things, right? I don't expect you to learn every language and to learn about every sort of science, right? You're becoming a mechanical engineer, so you're there is so much you have to learn about your particular thing. I don't expect you to also become a doctor and a lawyer and a petroleum engineer, and there are so many things that to be a preach it, Jacob. Yeah, this is my what I preach the most is um, the importance of the logos, the importance of discussion, the importance of conversation. That's
Yeah.
why I have my just chatting streams. I want people to think with each other, and I want us to think with each other truthfully and teach each other. But we don't have to teach everything, from the very beginning. Trusting other people with our cognition, people that we know we can trust. And this is why I believe belief in God is so key, right? Because if you actually believe in God, if you are being honest, that allows me to trust you in ways that I simply cannot trust somebody who is all things to all men, is willing, it doesn't have that type of faith, that iman, that doing the right thing and speaking truthfully will in fact bring us forward, right? um, that iman, that faith is incredibly important as a fundamental of society, and I think that's part of the reason our societies are falling apart.
Yeah. That's right. It's like just talk about how if someone's on their own, they go crazy. I was thinking of the was the wolf girl example. It's like if she wasn't raised by anyone, raised by the wolves, it's like since your brain doesn't have enough cognitive power to run its own, you need other people. You become like an animal if you don't have other people around you. It does show.
Yeah, and like this has happened to several people, children who were abused or stuff, and um, we need other people, and it's important to choose good people. It's important to put your trust in people that you can actually trust, and usually your family and your masjid, and those are the people which you can trust. And that's why it's so important to I live in Los Angeles, where a lot of people um, very much live alone, and it's very damaging to the society. That's part of why I am so for having community, and why I'm trying to create a community as best I can here.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at Japan. There, you can see their society.
Yep.
Those Go ahead.
Euthifro, I hope I'm saying that. Does God say something is good because it is good, or is that thing good because God calls it that, i.e., divine command theory? The resolution to Euthifro is that true goodness, rightness, etc., is grounded in God's nature. I would say that goodness is grounded in God's nature, but I don't like the term divine simplicity, um, but that is how this idea goes into it. Um, I live alone too, but I make sure I cherish my connections. Yeah, and honestly, like Garth, well, hopefully you'll be getting married soon. But you have your family and you have your community, and that's really important. And that's another thing I tell young men: get married young, get married early, get married quickly. Find a good person to share your life with, because that's one of the most important things you will ever do. And it's far, far, far more important than any degree or any job or anything like that. But that's me preaching, and I don't mean to preach at people. I need more water. So I am going to trust you with my channel. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I will be back in a few minutes.
Right, okay. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not gonna embarrass myself and say some stuff. I'll just stay quiet too. Bazani, it's honestly just thinking. Like, really, before, when I used to be atheist, I didn't really think at all. I was just, my life was basically just party, party, party. Don't think about who you are. But then, like, looking at arguments for God's existence is when I actually, you know, came back to believing, I guess. It's the logical
So
part
were
of
you
that.
listening? Like, which channels were you listening to?
It's probably mostly Muhammad Hijab's contingency arguments is the one that got me, I think. That he's the one that started it all. I listened to his argument, listened to some more like Kalam, like the, what was it, cosmological arguments, some other of those, and the, I don't know, what was it, the moral arguments, the subjective, objective morality. Just read all those and just they made sense to me. I was like, okay, I'll just
Were
follow
you
the truth.
influenced by Jordan Peterson at all?
Um,
Have you heard of him?
I have heard of him, but I haven't really been influenced by him. I wouldn't say.
Mm.
Like, to be honest, I don't know. I feel like he's a internet personality, more of a thinker. For me, honestly, that's how I see him. More like I see him as what's his name, Andrew Tate, the other guy. I, I, I,
Ooh,
yeah, I see
okay.
like both.
No,
the
that's not fair.
I don't know. I mean, that's how
Andrew Tate,
That's my view.
that's not fair. So
It's like,
the lobster is actually this little corner of the internet is very Jordan Peterson adjacent,
okay,
and I understand what you're saying.
yeah.
He definitely is an internet personality, but and frankly, look, he was a professor, and I think he's actually, he's an okay thinker for his position. Like he was a published scholar, and he is an accomplished psychologist.
Mm.
I think he has been propelled into places which are far, far more culturally important than really he should be,
That's 100% true.
because right now we live in a time where speaking things which are just plain common sense is so rare that people are like, hey, he's like speaking common sense. Right? And it's like, yeah, he's so most of the complaints I get is he's not saying anything new, and it's like, yeah, I'm not I am not a Jordan Peterson fan, and I do consider myself a fan of Jordan Peterson. Um, because I actually think his ideas are so revolutionary, or that I like those ideas which are real contributions. Like, he has made scientific contributions. If you look into his history, he is a genuine scholar in psychology. But I don't think like he would be the international phenomenon that he is if it wasn't his old college lectures were better than his more recent stuff. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but I think as a cultural phenomenon, he's just become an effigy. He has become a kind of flag to rally behind of somebody who um, speaks a lot of sense.
Right. I mean, what was his latest video? He's talking about what was it, Muslims. If you've seen it, I think you have. It's caused a lot
I
of
did see
outrage.
that. There was a lot of outrage, but I have to say, like, again,
He comes from a good place. Like I know like his intentions, but to be honest, reality is so much more different than what he really like is proposing.
okay, so I have to say, this goes back to what I was talking to Dr. Andani about
Mhm.
before you came on. Um, and Dr. Andani, I believe, is absolutely correct when he says this. The the atmosphere of Islam, especially in English, in the United States, has very much become um, an echo chamber of Salafi and really Saudi
Yeah, the
talking
Najdi
points,
Dawa. Yeah,
because Saudi Arabia puts so much money into promoting those scholars, which I, from my experience, most Muslims, like, they're not actually very denominational at all as far as their Islam.
yeah, that's true.
Um, and this is something I was talking to Dr. Andani about, and the influence, especially, and so when I saw the reaction, like Muhammad hijab, like, I it was the exact reaction I expected of somebody whose entire career depends on getting on towing the line that Saudi Arabia tells him he must tow.
Right.
Like, what Jordan Peterson said, especially regarding, okay, Sunnis and Shiites need to stop fighting against each other, is something that Saudi Arabia is absolutely completely opposed to. And anybody who's getting funding from Saudi Arabia, which I can only imagine Mohammed hijab must in fact completely reject.
Mm, right.
And
See,
I don't know hijab. I really don't. So
Yeah, I mean, Muhammad Hijab, like honestly, he's not a great character. I'm gonna have to say that he blunders a lot more than other people, and you don't know his motives. He's a very mysterious person, yeah, who supports him, who all those stuff. But you look at his content. If you want to see who's giving what the person is, you look at his content, and you can tell he is very Salafi leaned. Like he leans to the Salafi side, right? But he also condemns other Salafis, which is quite weird. I don't know how that works. You know?
I would be very surprised and delighted if if he has any strongly held position which does not exactly follow the Saudi line. And if it is true that he does, and I don't know if he does or he doesn't, right? But any human being is not going to 100% toe any one particular line. Like even when you look at, like, when I talk to Catholics, right? And I talk to Catholic priests. There are two Catholic priests I've invited on my channel, and Father Eric Seitz, for example, is somebody I invite on a regular basis, and he's always welcome, and I'm going to have him again. Um, and so he is a Catholic priest in good standing, but there are certain things that he believes which are not exactly in line with, and you're going to get that with any human being, even with a Catholic priest in about Catholicism. And I think you'll even find it, various bishops have various beliefs. Saudi Arabia is a monarchy.
Mm.
There is a line of thought that the House of Saud officially has,
Mm.
and anybody who does not toe that line exactly um, is suddenly becomes anathema. And I think that's what we see when, for example, Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, or now apparently Khalil, feel that they must, in fact, they must um, condemn Khalil Andani. And I felt a very similar thing to when um, Jordan Peterson made that video in which he pissed off the Saudis, um, and suddenly every Muslim who before was like, "Oh, Jordan Peterson seems like a good guy," suddenly they all became anti Jordan
Yeah,
Peterson
that's true.
overnight.
That's 100% true. Yeah, there's actually lots of content creators who they said Jordan Peterson was great. They're like in some videos, and then the next video it's just don't listen to him. He's against the manhaj. If you ever heard of that, he's
No,
the against the curriculum. I guess the manhaj means curriculum in direct translation, but you know,
huh? I'd
it's
never heard that word before.
yeah, no, you'll hear that a lot by the pseudo Salafis. They always say that it's kind of a meme now. You're off the manhaj. It's just a meme within
Off
Salafis.
the manhaj. Okay.
Yeah,
Um. Okay, manhaj. I've never. I'm gonna have to look up manhaj.
yeah. So, uh,
Methodologies of the righteous Salaf.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I guess the word would be manhig in Hebrew. Interesting. Hanhaga. Huh. Very interesting. Okay. Um. Yeah, that's interesting. It must be really late in Ireland right now.
It's almost 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't slept yet. I probably should sleep now. I have to wake up early.
You do have to sleep, and I hope you're keeping up with your prayers.
Yeah, it's when's it? Yeah, so it's in about an hour. That Fajr.
Yeah.
It's going to start. So
And you're supposed to go to sleep before Fajr, apparently.
yeah, after Isha. That's if I'm not doing the night prayers, but yeah, it's better to sleep after Isha. Oh man, I will. I'm up anyway, so might as well just stay for a bit longer. It's already nighttime. I swear at the start of the stream it was basically daytime over there. Or is it? You said in LA?
Yeah, yeah. So 3 hours ago, yeah, it was daytime. It's sunset. Yeah, it's almost 7 p.m. right now.
That's crazy. I've only been here for about 2 hours. And it's gone from day to night that quickly.
Well, that's what I guess Gurub is. Am I saying it correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It,
Ghurub.
that's what happens.
Yeah.
So, do you speak Arabic fluently?
Yeah, I do. My parents they raised me to speak Arabic. They've done a really good job at that. So
And
It's-
you read and write it?
um, it's the writing is quite slow, but the reading is okay. Like I can read fine. It's just the writing I'm quite slow at because I haven't really practiced.
Mm, mm.
You know, and you get the language, but since it's a completely different script to English, it's just yeah, I can't write it. It's really slow.
Can you type in Arabic?
I use this Arabic keyboard. I don't have an Arabic keyboard, so I use an online Arabic keyboard to just click on the letters, and that's how I type out in Arabic, and I just copy and paste it wherever I need to paste the Arabic there. But actually, I ordered what was it some Arabic keycaps for my keyboard just like 2 days ago from AliExpress.
Yeah.
It took me like a month to get here.
I don't. I mean, I thought about ordering the Hebrew ones. Sometimes it gets annoying because I forget where one particular letter is, and I try to find it. I don't write in Hebrew very often because I don't actually know how to compose things in Hebrew. Because I just learned to read it really, not to actually write
Yeah.
it.
That's exactly
But
like me.
yeah, yeah.
In the exact same situation. So right now I'm actually reading a lot of like Arabic books on kind of the Salafi view of Islam. I'm on this book now. It's talking about the Athari Creed. So I'm trying to look. I'm looking forward to the part where it talks about the hand.
Mhm.
You know, of God. See what's up with that. Yeah, but we're always learning, seeing what's right. So
Well, I mean, um, I would say more than I mean, I don't know that much about Islam,
Mhm.
but I think it's important to be well informed about the primary texts as you're learning about the secondary texts,
yeah,
because people are making arguments from particular positions. I am sure that, for example, Dr. Andani is going to quote very different hadith and uh, ayat than the ones that the books on the Athari Creed are going to.
mm. I mean, yeah, the Quran and the Hadith, the Quran and Sunnah are really important. I'm also, when I was actually young, I actually memorized almost one third of the Quran.
Really?
My parents had me go through this like course. Had one third of it just memorized completely off without knowing a single meaning of what what I was reading. It's quite strange. I could read all these things, and sometimes these verses they come back to me, but most of the time, most of it's just forgotten. When I left Islam for that while, so
It
right
might
now,
come back to you. I mean, I think being able to recite the Quran, I I,
it's
w- I would I would consider going back to it if I were you.
yeah. I mean, I'm actually memorizing right now. I've memorized one chapter, so it's
Mhm.
basically there's how many 30 chapters in the Quran. So I've memorized one now off by heart, but it's much easier since the time I started because I can kind of remember these things. It's like some of the oh yeah, this is like nostalgic, you know. Oh, I remember this one. That's when I was 10. I did that, you know. So it's much easier to learn than when I first started off. I guess you could say.
Hmm. No, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful.
Also, then the hadith, the sunnah. Um, so in my view, the sunnah is just as important as the Quran, because like without the sunnah, you don't really know how to pray. Like prayer isn't it's mentioned in the Quran, but how to pray or like how many rakat or whatever the ritual goes, like or the steps or the procedure, you don't know unless you go back to the sunnah or the hadith. So I
Okay,
see.
I have to ask Khalil's question from you. How many rakat in voodoo?
Yeah, that's the one that got you confused, right? I remember.
I was like, what is he asking?
Yeah, no, it's
Like, I started wondering if while doing voodoo, you actually recited verses or not.
yeah, no. So the thing is with that, it's just it's just a test to see if you're a real Muslim or not. To be honest, but the when we're doing the wudu, that actually you do recite a few things at the start. You say Bismillah, so
Mm.
in the name of God, basically, and then at the end, you say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So you say there's no God but Allah. Right. So
Mm.
you do actually say things, but there's no rakat.
So
You
there are
don't.
two rakat in voodoo.
The thing about rakat, it's actually a physical action where you bow down. Rakat means bowing.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I thought they were verses.
No, verses is ayat.
Ayat.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one,
Ayat.
yeah. So that's one verse, and many verses is ayat.
Okay.
So that's when they say ayatullah. That means the verses of Allah. So in Iran, they got the
Yeah.
ayatollahs.
Okay.
So that's
Interesting.
what that
Yeah.
meant.
Well, yeah. I mean, the idea that I mean, we say similar things about rabbis is that they are like a walking Torah
Mm,
because they know it and they live it. So they are,
mm,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, even Jesus, if a better example, it's Jesus is the word of God. So what the Christians say, you know. So
Hmm.
they also have that kind of version of the Ayatollahs.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So I don't know. I mean, for me, I've been reading some history books by this fringe scholar named Robert Eisenman, which Christians don't like and Muslims like even less. But I, uh, I think he's actually got his history pretty correct.
Uh,
Um, I was surprised that Dr. Andani said he read the book when he was 15. It's like 1,000 pages long. It's not an easy book to understand, but Dr. Andani's really really smart.
yeah. So what's his book called? If you,
James, the brother of Jesus. So Eisenman is a so Eisenman was he started out as a scholar of Islam, but because there was there weren't um, nobody wanted him to teach classes about the history of Islam. He's a history professor. He
mm,
started doing um, the history of Christianity as well, and he ended up working on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he actually became one of the best scholars of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he has a theory which I am not 100% on board with, but I think actually, and he basically he got it from um, what a lot of Muslims believe about what happened um, what happened after Jesus's death. Well, Muslims
Before.
believe his appearance, right?
Yeah.
Which is that this idea that Paul, although I've heard some people will deny that Paul is actually in, that there are actual beliefs about Paul in Islam, but um, this idea that Paul came and basically changed Islam.
Mm.
So Dr. Eisenman, and I think he's absolutely, I think he's actually right, is that there was a Jewish Christianity and there was a Gentile Christianity, and the Gentile Christians became the Pauline Christians and became what is today what we know of as Christianity, and the Jewish Christians went out into Arabia, and they actually ended up becoming being the people that um, the so I mean it really depends whether you believe the whole Petra thing or not, like, right? But which I'm sure you've heard of, but and I don't want to get into, but like there he has this idea that Islam is actually came out of Jewish Christianity, and when it talks about the Jews and the Christians in the Quran, it's actually talking about Jewish Christianity as it existed then. And um, this gets even more controversial, but I actually think the Shia are actually the real remnants of Jewish Christianity, and the Sunnis are kind of sort of like the Gentile version of
Of the Jewish
Islam.
Christians? The
Yeah.
Gentiles of the Jewish Christians. Right, okay.
So like a second like reinterpreting of Jewish Christianity, like in a similar way as I believe like the Christians are what is a Gentile interpretation of what was Jewish Christianity. I
Okay.
think that the Sunni Islam is the Gentile reinterpretation of Shiite Islam, which I think is actually original, personally. But this is like me getting involved in.
Yeah. I mean,
in
to be honest, Shiites and Sunnis aren't really that different. The only thing they differ on is, I mean, the original thing that they differ on is the imamate, who's the
and
leader.
and even by the Sunnis, like the fourth righteous imam is Ali.
Mhm.
But as I understand it, what happened after that is that there were different caliphates,
Mhm.
and you know the Shia became, and their imams. I mean, I I didn't I didn't bring this up. I do want to talk to Dr. Andani about the Aga Khan, because it's like, you look at the present Aga Khan and his dad. There's a reason why the grandfather decided to skip a generation of the Aga Khan. Like his dad was not really a very religious Muslim at all. And even the Aga Khan today, it's like if you were picking an imam to be like the caliph, I don't think most people would do that. It's like it's hereditary, like these hereditary religious positions fall into the problem of what do you do when the person who inherits it is not an actually religious person. Like we had this problem in Judaism with the priesthood, the hereditary priesthood, and that's why we have rabbis, even though we kind of still have a hereditary priesthood, because like hereditary leadership, it doesn't really work very well ultimately.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. I mean, the whole idea of the what was it? I don't know what they call it in Shia Islam, to be honest, but they have like the rightfully or the divinely
Yeah, they
chosen
call it the
imams.
imam.
Yeah, that whole idea of that, like what? So they have the 12 imams, I think. So like, why stop at
So
12? You know, it's,
that's the Twelvers, which is the majority of the Shia.
mm.
The Ismailis, they still have an Aga Khan, like he's alive today,
Oh really?
and like, oh yeah, yeah, and this is something that gets really controversial. He lives in Great Britain, I want to say, and like he's been divorced twice. You know?
What? No way.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's like this really rich. Um, he's a billionaire. Oh, we should. Okay, so let's look up the Aga Khan.
Yeah.
Uh,
See.
so his dad, um, so his dad was like this total playboy.
Mm.
Um, let's.
He has 4 different citizenships. What?
Yeah, so the Aga Khan. This is the current Aga Khan, and he he's the 49th Imam, and his father was um, was like a total playboy, um, and so the grandfather kind of like skipped one. Um, so this is the current one,
Mm.
and yeah, he in the 1964 Olympics. So he was only like I think he was in his early 20s when he became Aga Khan. Um, so his father, yeah. So this is his father, right? And like the story of his life, Prince Ali Khan was famously a man about a town in his youth. I have been involved with several women, he gamely told a reporter when asked about his life. His list of affairs included high-profile lovers such as British debutante Margaret Wigham, later Duchess of Argyll, and Thelma Viscountess Furness, an American who was simultaneously involved with the Prince of Wales. Of his first wife, he remarked, "I was tired of trouble. Joan was a sane and solid girl, and I thought if I married her, I would stay out of trouble." Now, this is the mother of the current Aga Khan, right? So Ali Khan was named co-respondent in Guinness versus Guinness and Khan divorce suit between Joan Barbara Guinness and group captain Thomas Lowell Guinness, a scion of the Guinness brewery family. In 1935, Guinness sued for divorce, naming Ali Khan as the third party. He cited as evidence that his wife and Ali Khan had occupied a hotel room together uh, 3 days, and that his wife had told him she had formed an attachment for Ali Khan and desired her husband to divorce her. The case was uncontested, and Ali Khan was ordered to pay all costs. Ali Khan and Joan Barbara Guinness were married in Paris in 1936, a few days after the divorce became absolute. Before the wedding, the bride converted to Islam. Their first child is the current Aga Khan. Like, and then after he got divorced, he married Rita Hayworth. you know who Rita Hayworth is?
No,
She was a very famous Hollywood star. So like, you know, and his father, the Aga Khan, decided to skip him and make um, the current Aga Khan his inheritor for good reason. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
would you want this guy to be like the caliph? You know, and if Dr. Andani watches this, I am incredibly sorry for being disrespectful towards your religious leader, but like,
He can't blame you.
I'm sorry. And you know, if Dr. Andani was here, I would ask him respectfully about this stuff. But it's like,
Yeah.
come on, like this is a very good reason why you don't do hereditary leadership. You know, after generate like how many generations, and frankly, I think their claim may actually be the best claim for hereditary, like if you believe that the children of Ali should inherit, I actually think they probably have a pretty good claim. But it's like
Yeah. I know. It's
it,
like
it
the Nepalese ones. What would they call the ones in Nepal? The Buddhist. They've got the same system. Can't remember the name
the
of it.
Buddhists, so
Yeah.
they actually select, as far as I thought. Although well, I know the Dalai Lamas, like
That's the one. Yeah.
they select.
They
Although,
select.
yeah, they like when one dies. So the Dalai Lama and there's a different Panchan Lama, I think it is, and each one, like when one dies, the other one selects the successor. So that's how they work. Like, so when the Dalai Lama dies, I believe it's the Panchen Lama selects the successor to the Dalai Lama, and when the Panchen Lama dies, the so that and they pick a child which then they raise as the next Lama.
Okay. And if they both die at the same time, then it's just too bad. It's just that's
Well,
just the end.
right now the problem is China arrested and possibly murdered the the previous Panchen Lama and chose
Wow.
one for themselves. And so like the current Dalai Lama refuses to acknowledge the one that China chose, but it's not obvious if the other one is still alive, so he's not choosing a different one.
Yeah.
So like China did, like it's possible that he's so it's yeah. I mean that's bad enough, but like I mean we had a similar thing with the exilarchs in Judaism. The when Babylon took the king of Israel into captivity. This is 2,400 years ago, 2,500 years ago,
Mm.
right? So they actually kept the the royal line, and there was an exilarch who was the hereditary um, descendant of the kings of David, of the Davidic line. And that that continued for a good 1,000 years. I think the most recent exilarch, like when was the most recent exilarch? Um, so um, yeah, was like the year 1000,
Right.
even after, right? And these people were not great people.
Yeah.
And so pretty early in Jewish history, and part of the this was part of the problem with between the rabbis and the Maccabees, because the Maccabees, even though they were not descendants of David, claimed to be rulers in Israel because they were priests, and there was a lot of thing, and the exilarchs, into the time of the Talmud, they were still operating, and they were naming the leaders of the academies, so the head rabbis in the academies in Babylon. But so we do we still, that's where the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, came from, is from those academies whose heads were in fact appointed by the exilarch. But
Right.
there was, yeah, and so ultimately about 1,000 years ago, it kind of completely fell apart. um, but yeah,
Is there an account of how it fell apart, or is it just
yeah, it was some family, like, so uh, since these were not incredibly nice people, so let's see what happened. Um, when High Gaon died in 1038, nearly a century after Sadia Gaon, um, the members of his academy could not find a more worthy successor than the exilarch Hezekiah. So this exilarch actually became the head of the academy, a great grandson of David ben Zakkai, who thereafter filled both offices. He was the exilarch and the head of the academy, Gaon. But 2 years later, in 1040, Hezekiah, who was the last exilarch and also the last Gaon, fell a victim to calumny by a peer. He was imprisoned and tortured to death. Two of his sons fled to Spain, where they found refuge with Joseph, the son and successor of Shmuel Hanagid. Yeah, so apparently that's his two sons ended up fleeing.
right? Okay.
Yeah, so about 1,000 years ago was the last official exilarch, and and so the Gaonim were the leaders of the academies, and apparently this last exilarch was actually, as you know, worthy of being the Gaon.
Right. It says something about the later traces. Okay.
But it was a very smart thing for the Babylonians when they took the Davidic king into captivity. They didn't just kill them; they kept them alive as like vassal. We actually, apparently, one of the oldest archaeological things that we have is, so was it this guy? Is actually, yeah, this is it. This is the clay tablet. So the Akkadian
Oh.
cuneiform inscription lists certain rations and mentions the name of Jeconiah, king of Judah. So this guy was the actual guy, and it's from 580 BCE. So this
Wow.
tablet is 2,600 years old. And it's basically it's a record of what the Babylonians were spending to maintain his court um, during the exile.
You know, it actually reminds me in school, our teacher used to talk about the Babylonians, and they have the tablet for the what was it? The Pythagorean theorem. It's like they have different numbers for those. So the three, you know, the Pythagorean triplets. The
Huh.
Babylonians had a whole tablet of that. Let me see what it was called. Hold on. It was the same
didn't
clay
know.
tablet. Babylonian, Pythag. Yeah, there it is. Right, okay. There's a tablet.
Yeah, so this tablet actually gives the same thing as what is in the Bible in the book of Chronicles and Kings.
Hmm. Let's see. What's the name of this tablet? Right, yes, it's called Plimpton 322 is the name of the tablet. It's just basically a clay tablet with the numbers of the what was it? The like Pythagorean triplets. It's so you know the way to the right angle triangle had the sides length 3, 4, and then the Pythagoras would be 5, right? So they had a whole list of those triplet numbers, like
Oh, I
interesting.
see. Oh, I see. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they had like the whole grasp on that type of math before. That's what the origin of the Pythagorean triplets basically. Was when it was first recorded. That's it.
Huh. Okay.
It's another one here as well. Yeah, it's the 3, 4, 5, 8, 15, 17, 5, 12, 13. And these were likely used to help determine the land's boundaries? Right, okay. That's kind of cool. So they actually did have some kind of use case. I thought it was just theory.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of like really interesting archaeological evidence.
Yeah.
And honestly, for me, like the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls has been absolutely miraculous, and it's making a big change in Christian theology, I would say.
Yeah. You're right, 100%. You know, I'm starting to feel really, 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 really tired now.
You should go, and I should go. We've been doing this for like 3.5 hours.
Yeah, that's true.
I've been doing this for 3.5 hours, and I should actually get to work and like do work and stuff.
Okay, right. You know, it's been a huge honor speaking to you, and I've learned a lot, and it was very beneficial speaking
It
with
was
you.
my honor, and it was very beneficial to me. And you're always welcome here. And yeah, uh, and I look forward to continuing talking to you. I don't know if you do Discord, but you're very welcome in my
Oh
Discord
yeah,
community. There's a link in the description.
right.
Um,
That's brilliant. I'll join that.
and Bazani says, "Was nice getting to sit in. Have a good night. Good night,
Good night
Bazani,
to you too. Right.
and good night, Mohammed." And I think I am going to actually end the broadcast.